Erev Shabbat greetings to all today, Friday, the 10th of November. Sorry about that. The 8th of November, the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Mar Cheshvan, coming into a very, very special Shabbat, a very special parsha called Lech, where we begin the journeys, travails, and powerful spiritual message of Avraham Avinu, Abraham, really the father of our people. I did, however, promise a formulation of what we discussed last week. There was a wonderful essay, which I distributed, written by Rabbi Yanki Tauber, who does very interesting essays based on the talks of the Rebbe of Lubavitch. And as you recall, we spoke about the newness of the idea of the rainbow, which represents symbolically the light of the sun, which is the godly revelation from above, and the clouds, which is physically created from mist, which comes from below. So the rainbow represents at first the interaction between God and man, the above and the below, and more specifically, how we prism the light. In other words, we actually don't create something new in it, but as we internalize it and live according to it and try to understand it, we're actually able to show the various colors and the beauty of it. And however, what I did thereafter was looked in the original text of the Sikh and found out there are some nuances which actually simplify it just a bit, and also a very beautiful explanation. And just to begin with, so I tried to re-explain it very briefly. If you'll bear with me, and I do think it's worth it. So the question is raised in commentaries. What does it mean that God says, I'm making a rainbow, this is the sign, I will never destroy the world again? The world was created the 6 days of creation. It says, Al Mlu'o in the Talmud explains God so it's very good. Everything the world needed was there. It was a completely self-sufficient and fine physical world. The rainbow is a natural phenomenon. If the rainbow already existed because of the natural phenomenon that it represents, so then it cannot be a sign between God and man. It was something that already was. It's something that is created through this natural phenomenon. If the rainbow did not exist previously, then what's happening? Why not? The whole world was created. We had sun, we had rain, we had mist. What's going on here? So the Rebbe combines a spiritual take and a scientific take on it, that the idea of the prism, that the clouds act as a prism, where then the droplets of water act as a prison for the rays of the sun. Clearly, as we know, the quality, the prism has to have a certain degree of transparency. And the clouds, otherwise if it's too dense, it will not act as a prism. And it will not divide the rays, the white light, into the various colors. If it's too thin, then it's not a prism either, then it will just continue being white light. So too thick means blocking the sun, too thin means not breaking it into its respective colors. The exact refined nature of the clouds that breaks it into the colors, this is what we need. And so just to begin with, the world was created. Man's behavior became unacceptable, and then there was the flood. We must understand that the flood, and indeed all things which seem to be punishments in the Torah, in fact, are not punishments. They are a way, what is called a tikkun, a rectification. So hence, their nature is in a way that is meant to remove and to cure the problem, not merely to express some kind of revenge or something like that. And indeed, the flood was hopefully not meant to happen. We see that it took 120 years for the ark to be built. And the reason is explained in Rashi, that indeed it was meant to be a warning sign. People should ask, Noah, why are you building this ark? To which he would answer, God has told us and made an ultimatum: if we do not improve our behavior, stealing, sexual immorality, and so on, then he'll bring a flood to the world, with the hope that with the hope that they will improve their ways. It was the classic idea of the prophet wanting to be hit wrong, or in the sense the prophet wanting his prophecy not to become a reality. And indeed, there's a wonderful comment in some of the Hasidic books based on the verse and in Rashi, saying how Rashi writes that Noah didn't actually go into the Teva until the rain started falling already. And one explanation says because he so much believed in the power of humanity that they would return to God, that he still felt that people would, in a split second, as we know, repentance doesn't need to take a long time. So the whole idea of the ultimatum of the flood was for people to improve themselves. The idea of the flood itself was not to punish mankind. For this, it would have been easier to do some kind of other punishment. The flood is water. Water is purifying. And indeed, it says it was 40 days of the flood. And especially the Hasidus explains that the 40 days of the flood correspond to the 40 so-called seah of the mikveh. Seah is a biblical measurement of volume, and hence the idea of the flood, this is a big mikveh for the world. So we see the whole problem was that the world, in its having become corrupt morally, became coarser. The person became coarser. There's a rule, it's as expressed in the verse, Ha'olam natan belibam, which we have discussed, that God put the world in the heart of man. Man becomes a microcosm and, in a sense, a control panel almost, because the world was created for us to use it properly. When the man becomes coarser, humankind becomes coarser, the whole world becomes coarser. What happened then? So the clouds were also, before the time of the flood, coarser. There was a certain, in Yiddish, there's a wonderful word like a grobkeit. It means surovost, we say. It was, so everything was more coarse, and the clouds were coarse to a degree. They were clouds, it was rain, everything existed, the whole world was created, but they were not refined enough to act as a prison. Now that the flood had accomplished that purification of the world, the clouds were now more refined. This actually is the guarantee that the world will not be destroyed, because man also became more refined. And this converges in the idea of the rainbow. So in our question, how can the rainbow be the sign that God will not destroy the world? And now it was natural, but now we say nature changed, clouds became more refined, but the refining of the cloud represents the increased refined nature of humankind. But not just that we're better, because we can still sin. But what can we do? We can interact, we can absorb light of the sun and break it down into its respective colors, which means God gave a new power to mankind, which was the ability for mankind to improve itself. This is what became new. And actually, the sign of the rainbow is a sign that God instilled us with the ability for self-improvement. And because we have this ability of self-improvement, hence the answer to moral corruption in the future times will not be punishment, destruction, or nothing. It will be, we answer it by rising to that challenge, becoming better, and therefore God will not need to destroy the world. So I wanted to give that very wonderful take on Noah.